Good morning, councillors. Good morning, executive. Good morning to those joining us via the digital gallery this morning. It's my privilege to declare the ordinary meeting of the Tuesday, the 25th of May 2021 open. And in doing so, I would again pause and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and across which our magnificent scenic rim is formed. Pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and indeed extend congratulations to them for their continued and thoughtful nurture of culture. I note the attendance of all councillors bar Councillor Chalk, who had previously had an approved granting of leave, and a full attendance of the executive team for the meeting today. I note therefore the apologies of Councillor Chalk on approved leave. And it brings me then to item 4, which is the prayers for our meeting today, and it's a privilege to welcome Reverend Peter Blake from Fassifern Uniting Church, who I believe is with us via phone. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. Let's pray. Father, we bless you for this day. We bless you for the land of the Scenic Rim region that you have provided for us all. We thank you for the Aboriginal people who have cared and continue to care for it. We thank you for the provision of leaders in the form of the Mayor and the Councillors. We ask today that as they make decisions, that you would inspire them with wisdom, you would give them a keen sense of the principles that they need to bear in mind, and a sense of all the issues at play. We thank you that you love order and that this is part of your work in the world to bring flourishing to all people. May everyone know that they are loved and valued by God as they participate in his work. Amen.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for leading us in prayers. I understand that you probably also have a busy schedule, and we will understand if you don't continue with us today, and look forward to catching up in the near future.
Thank you, Matt.
Councillors, we turn to item 5 on our agenda, and I ask if there are any declarations of prescribed or declarable conflicts of interest for the meeting today. I take it silence means there are none, so there are no announcements for us today. There are no deputations, and I've not been advised of any other matter to be tabled. So we turn to item 8, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 11th of May. Councillors, you've had access to these in the intervening period. There's a recommendation there that I shall read. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 11th of May 2021 be adopted. I seek a mover.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor West. Are there any questions to the minutes or the recommendation or the motion? If not, then I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell, any desire to speak, Councillor?
No, thank you.
Anyone else seeking leave to speak? If not, we put the motion to adopt the minutes. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And we move to item 9. There is no business before the meeting today arising from those minutes. So we move to item 10 and 10.1 of our agenda, and I'll ask the CEO to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, councillors, executive officers and members of the public listening at home. The first item today is the appointment of councillors on various committees and forums. This is an annual review that's undertaken, and just by way of background, over recent months, council have been reviewing the committees and other forums which they have representation on behalf of council, and we have attempted to streamline this process by only identifying the process here today, those appointments that are made through resolution of council, because we're aware that the mayor, divisional councillors have a number of other committees and groups that they attend, either on a voluntary or an invited basis. So we've kept that list separate. We've referred to that as table B, and that hasn't appeared today. It's still being finalised. We have an amount of information there which from a number of councillors, and it doesn't require adoption by council. So to try and streamline the process, we've presented today table A, which we believe are those roles and opportunities for councillors that need resolution. There are a number of committees and groups within South East Queensland and Queensland which councillors do attend, and it helps build the role of a councillor, plus also ensures that council remains connected with both the local community and also the wider community across South East Queensland and Queensland. So the process, Mr Mayor, would be that each of the 12 appointed positions today we would go through one by one, and Sharon, in terms of minute clerk, would record each, and then we would move the recommendation at the end to adopt that as one whole one whole resolution.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any questions to the report for clarification, councillors? If not, we shall move to the process. Sorry, Councillor McConnell.
Procedural motion, if I can, please, Mr Mayor. I'd like to defer the first one, the appointment of the Deputy Mayor, until until Councillor Chalk returns.
Sorry, Councillor. I note your procedural motion. So you can move procedural motion without a second. So we shall now consider your procedural motion. Speak to the reasons why that would be a requirement.
I believe that all councillors within the chamber should be able to have their say on who is the Deputy Mayor, and the fact that Marshall is absent on approved leave. I think he still deserves to have his say on who will be the Deputy Mayor.
Wishing to speak against? If not, I will speak against. Do you wish to speak, Councillor West?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to say that, you know, we still need to get on with the business of council, even if a councillor is on approved leave, which is why I believe we have to progress with this today. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in support of the procedural motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to speak in support of the motion. Look, one of the things that are in our code of conduct is that, you know, we should be fair and equitable. We shouldn't discriminate. A whole lot of things. I think the standard for us in that code of conduct is that we are absolutely reasonable in these things, and we have a member who's given us a lot of notice that he's going to be away, and so I think it's probably a little bit unreasonable to bring on such an important vote when we've all known for quite a long time that the council is going to be away on this particular date.
Anyone else wishing to speak against the motion? I shall speak against the motion. I believe it's a very dangerous precedent to suggest that you know, there's been very strong comment by a number of councillors who've already spoken about we need to get on with this. We've already run late because of the delay in sorting out the report. And those comments have been quite clear that this needs to be dealt with and moved forward. Therefore, it's appropriate that we continue. The notion that any time we think the balance in the chamber might not give us an outcome we'll ask for something to be left on the table until other parties are available, is a dangerous precedent. I note that everybody is aware that we go through this process, and there will be times where there are pressing matters of council that we won't be available for. That's considered in standing orders, and it's certainly considered in the legislation that the importance is to ensure a quorum for matters before the business, and it does not at any point in legislation or in the Code of Conduct require that all councillors are present for every matter. That's a very risky precedent. Councillor McGuinness, I believe you wanted to speak for.
Yes, Mayor, I speak in favour of the motion. I believe, like has already been said, Councillor Chalk gave us, I think it was 2 months' notice, if not 3 months' notice, that he was going to be away for this meeting. I think we could have quite easily had this resolution at a previous meeting, which in particular I wasn't there at the last meeting for ill health, but you can't foresee that. And I think it's, if someone gives notice that it's unfortunate, and I don't think it's a good look for the public that this is on when one councillor has given notice that he won't be here for a particular meeting. We could have had this at a previous meeting, especially Part A, and it could have been subject to implementation as of today's date at any rate. So I'm disappointed that it has turned up on today's meeting when Councillor Chalk is not there, and I'll be voting for the resolution to defer it.
A question to the CEO, not speaking to most of the question to the CEO, was it possible to have this report finalised prior to this meeting?
Mr. Mayor, I think the answer to that question is that there was a number of actions that were undertaken at the request of councillors to present the councillor nominations and committee representations in a different way, and that involved contact with individual councillors to ensure that we could complete what we refer to as Table B, which is the representations that we as officers don't always know that councillors, we don't always know which activities, groups, committees that councillors are invited to or attend. And so there's been a lot of work in the background to ensure that what we've referred to as Table B is as up to date as possible, and to meet deadlines of the ordinary meeting. It wasn't possible to have done this in terms of all of these appointments earlier. Perhaps we could have done the appointment of the Deputy Mayor separately, but that suggestion didn't come forward from councillors to do that. And on behalf of officers, when we prepare reports for council, we don't consider the absence of a councillor in preparing an agenda. We prepare an agenda on the basis of timing to ensure that we meet other requirements of council. And in this situation, the Deputy Mayor had been last appointed on the 25th of May 2020, so it needed to have been done today. Agreed, it potentially separately could have been done earlier this month, but as I said, that wasn't something that we were asked to investigate. The investigations that we were asked to undertake were to separate those functions which needed a resolution from those which were at committees and groups that councillors attended, and I'll say the word voluntarily or invited by these individual groups. And there was a lot of work done to separate that and to ensure discussions with all councillors to make sure that we have that list as complete as possible. That list still isn't as complete as possible, so we've moved ahead with table A separately.
Thank you for that.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. Just like to ask a question of the CEO, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
My question is, whose responsibility is it to prepare the agenda for this meeting? I'm not aware that it's councillors' responsibility to prepare the agenda. It's solely the purvey of the CEO. Is that not the case?
It's certainly the responsibility of the CEO to prepare the agenda for an ordinary meeting.
Thank you for the clarification. Anyone else wishing to speak against? If not, do you wish to speak again to your motion, Councillor McConnell?
Yes, if I could. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that Table A is councillor representation on committees and forums. I don't believe the Deputy Mayor position is a representation on a separate committee and forums. It's totally separate to the other appointments down there. I also think that if Councillor Chalk was here, he might want to nominate for the position, and we've now made it that he would not be able to represent the Scenic Rim as the Deputy Mayor if he so wished. So I believe that the appointment of the Deputy Mayor can be deferred for 14 days. I don't think that the current Deputy Mayor, Councillor McGuinness, would be upset too much, and that we can still appoint the other representation to committees and forums. Thank you.
Okay, we have a procedural motion before us, councillors. Put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? It's an equal vote. I have a casting vote, and I vote against the motion on the basis of continuing to support proper process of council. Motion's defeated. Division asked by Councillor McConnell. Divisions 1, 2 and 6 for. Divisions 3, 4 and Mayor against, and Mayor casting vote. Now we press on with declaring the position of Deputy Mayor vacant, and thank Councillor McGuinness for fulfilling that role. Seek nominations for the position of Deputy Mayor, and as I believe is appropriate as Mayor, I would put forward the nomination of Councillor Enright, if he's willing to consider that nomination.
Thank you, Mayor. I would accept that nomination.
Thank you. Do I have I think the process requires to have a seconder to that nomination for Deputy Mayor. I think so. Correct. Have a seconder to that motion. Nomination.
Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Enright's
Councillor
nomination.
West seconds that nomination. Are there other nominations?
Yes, Mayor. I would ask if Councillor McConnell would consider standing for Deputy Mayor.
I thank Councillor McGuinness, but with the absence of Councillor Chalk to be able to have his say, I'm going to decline to accept that nomination.
Thank you. Councillor Swanborough.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Councillor McGuinness to retain the role as Deputy Chair. I think that's, and I'll speak in support of that motion later.
Well, it's just a nomination. It's not a motion, Councillor.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's just a nomination. Councillor McGuinness, you prepared to accept?
I think I thank the councillor for his nomination. I think we've decided to roll it over. I know I note in Ipswich Council, the deputy there actually stood for nomination too, even though they were beaten. But I declined the nomination, but I thank the councillor for his nomination.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations? In the absence of other nominations, then I believe a ballot isn't required. There's a single nomination and therefore an accepted
Can we
nomination.
still have a vote on it with one? Because I'm abstaining from any vote. I don't believe with Councillor Chalk here it's reasonable.
Well, Councillor, it would be highly unusual to do a vote where there's only a single nomination for a role, for the role of Deputy Mayor. Note your expression of
question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to ask the CEO whether a motion that is put forward can be decided without a vote under the standing orders.
So this is not, sorry, Councillor, this is not a resolution. This is a nomination and the resolution will follow. Councillor, did you not hear the procedure before?
I understood you didn't want to put it to a vote later, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, no, Councillor, there will be a resolution that identifies a number of things, which is, so CEO, perhaps explain again the process. If we want to deal with the Deputy Mayor as a separate resolution now, we have one nomination and we will then deal with that as a resolution, a separate resolution. My understanding was it was a line item in a resolution that will be completed at the end. That's where the vote will take place.
Mr. Mayor, I request under the standing orders that this matter be considered separately to the position of other committees.
I'm very happy then that we move forward. We have one nomination before it. So if we can just move to dealing with and the resolution that would now be just a little bit technically challenging to extract it. It's in the recommendation, but it needs to be pulled out and dealt with separately, that's all. So just gallery, give us a moment. This is just we need to follow a procedural process to extract this out of the consolidated recommendation. So you're just having you're just picking the resolution. The resolution is that Councillor Enright be appointed Deputy Mayor of Scenic Regional Council. For the term of nominal 12 months. Yeah, actually, yes, to be to be reviewed at the So I believe that's a satisfactory resolution. I seek a mover to the resolution. Thank you, Councillor West. I seek is there any further discussion or questions to the resolution?
Comments?
Comments you might have to reserve for discussion of the resolution. A seconder to the resolution. Thank you, Councillor Enright. Councillor West, would you like to speak to your motion? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As I recall, when we first became, in the last term of council, there was a decision to review the Deputy Mayor's position annually, really as a professional learning and experience type of opportunity for anyone who just to grow as a councillor, I guess, really. And I do notice now that some of our neighbouring councils have taken that on board also and are reviewing on an annual basis so that it gives everyone an opportunity to experience that role.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the resolution? Councillor Swanborough?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'll speak against the resolution. Just having a look at the standards of behaviour of councillors under the Code of Conduct, it says that we should treat people in a reasonable, just, respectful and non-discriminatory way. Based on the arguments that we've heard prior to this, I don't believe that we are doing the right thing, one by ourselves and two by Councillor Chalk, who's given us notice that he should not,
Councillor,
he
point
can't
of
be
order.
here.
Your discussion does not address this resolution. It addresses the previous procedural motion. The discussion here is about the appropriateness of Councillor Enright as Deputy Mayor. Can you just think about narrowing your focus to the relevant to the motion?
Mr Mayor, I just want to remind you also that under the standing orders, it is not appropriate for a chairman to interrupt another person while they're talking to stifle the debate. I mean, that's clearly set out in the standing orders that you cannot interrupt a person. And I believe there's no reason.
Stop for a moment.
Is this a point of order?
Yes, this is a point of order. To clarify, again, the point of order was to caution you to keep your contribution relevant to the motion, not to the previous motion, because that would be, that matter's been addressed. This is a resolution concerning the appointment of Councillor Enright, not the procedural motion. And I'm just urging you again that was the basis of my interruption, was to clarify, please ensure that your contribution is relevant to the motion that we are addressing.
Well, I believed it was, Mr Mayor, but I'll move on. This is a resolution about appointing another councillor as the Deputy Mayor's Deputy Mayor. And I was merely speaking against that, as we were required to do, simply because I don't think the question of equity and fairness and respect for each other around this table, you know, has passed the test. And so this is why I'm speaking against it. This is why I'll vote against it. And as Councillor McConnell has foreshadowed, you know, I would not be able to participate in such a vote under the circumstances.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for the resolution, the motion? Not, I will speak for the motion. Sorry, Councillor McConnell.
Speak against if I could.
Sorry, no, you can't, Councillor. Next speaker is for the motion. Then you'll get a chance. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. I'll speak for the motion. Councillor Enright has worked diligently to learn through a very volatile time of local government, and has applied himself to continue to learn and get involved across his communities and across the wider community, and to understand the strategic issues that this council addresses. He has shown himself on a number of occasions to be able to properly communicate and present on behalf of council at the strategic level. And as the Mayor, I believe it's important that I'm able to have confidence that, as councillors are, that a Deputy Mayor, when presenting on behalf of council, can carry that mantle effectively. And I have confidence that Councillor Enright is capable of discharging that role properly. You wish to speak against Councillor McConnell?
I will, because I can't ask you a question now, but I won't.
You can ask a question in the course of the motion.
You just inferred that Councillor Enright has the skills and that. Does that mean the rest of us don't have the skills, or Councillor Chalk doesn't have the skills?
I was very, Councillor, I was very careful with the extent of learning that I referred to, that it has taken some time. Just to clarify, I am comfortable that Councillor Enright has grown significantly over that time and has shown himself to have grown to a very strong stature in being able to separate from a lower level up to the proper strategic level, as well as explaining that into his community. Is that clarification? I didn't make a comment on others' skills. I was talking particularly about Councillor Enright.
I'll just let it be known that I don't believe this process has been fair and equitable to Councillor Chalk, so I'll be abstaining.
Councillor, I find that a very
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Comment.
Mr. Mayor, under the standing orders, you don't get to comment on a statement after a councillor has made a statement. You are required to remain silent, and you can't reflect after another councillor has spoken. Could you please adhere to those rules?
Councillor Swamborough, actually, it is my obligation as chair to consider whether a comment is appropriate for the meeting. That's actually my obligation. You clearly missed that interpretation.
You didn't call a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, I apologise that I spoke it out loud. I was reflecting on whether the comment required to be addressed by a point of order. I apologise that I spoke it out, but I do have to think about such matters. That is my obligation, and I'm sure you recognise that because your expertise in standing orders. We shall now move on.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that you've recognised that you didn't call a point of order, and you should have called a point of order to make the comments you did.
So, as a clarification, Councillor McConnell, I apologise that I thought out loud and decided that it wasn't worthy of a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to Councillor Enright, it is not a personal thing against you. It is purely a procedural thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor
Enright,
McConnell.
you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, if I may. I'm honoured to be nominated for this very important role. I have actively and consistently dedicated the last 5+ years in my role as councillor, and believe that I have gained the skills and experience to carry out the role of Deputy Mayor. Having been chair of the Corporate and Community Services Committee during the last term, chair of the Readiness Reference Group from 2016 to 2018 during the community activations in conjunction with the 2018 Commonwealth Games. If elected to this role, I will over the next 12 months take on the duties and responsibilities of the role of Deputy Mayor to the best of my ability. I will, if required, represent the Mayor should the Mayor be unavailable, including chair of meetings of council. In addition to these responsibilities, I will endeavour to work with all councillors and the Mayor to provide the best functioning council that we can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, anyone else wishing to speak against?
Yes, Mayor.
McGuinness.
Mayor, I will be abstaining. Like Councillor McConnell, I have the utmost respect for Councillor Enright personally, but I don't think process has been followed in the eyes of our ratepayers, and I don't think it's done our credibility a lot of good in the process that we've gone down here today.
Councillor West, do you wish to say anything further to your original resolution?
Well, no, only just really to say that this is the business of council and we need to get on with it.
Thank you. Put the motion. Those in favour of the resolution? Those against the resolution? Then the resolution is drawn because abstinence is shown as, is deemed as a vote against under standing orders. So noting 3 abstinences, I will make the casting vote in favour of the motion. Councillor McConnell, do you wish to say?
Call a division on that one, please, Mr. Mayor.
So the for the motion is Division 3, Division 4 and Mayor abstaining, Divisions 1, 2 and 6 casting vote for the resolution as abstentions are deemed as votes against. The motion's carried. Congratulations, Councillor Enright. Apologies that you were caught in a procedural bear trap, and I am sure the comments of personal support for you are genuine, and I look forward to continuing to progress the agenda of a strong region with your support. Move to now the rest of the items in the table, councillors. So we can go through the process of declaring vacant each one and seeking nomination. So the representation with Bowcare, if we declare that vacant and look for a nomination.
I'd be happy to nominate Councillor McConnell.
Councillor McConnell, are you happy to continue with that capacity?
Happy to continue, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any other competing nominations? If not, I believe because these are not bound by standing orders, we can move on the basis that there's only one nomination and it's been agreed by the individual, and we'll deal with it all by resolution at the end. The next is by Desert Rural Fire Group, and we declare that vacant at the moment. It's Councillor McConnell with Councillor West as proxy. Seek a nomination for lead and proxy.
Happy to nominate Councillor McConnell and Councillor West as proxy.
Councillor?
I accept, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor West?
I accept, thank you.
Thank you. Any other nominations? We will move forward on that basis. Boona Rural Fire Brigade Group, Councillor Chalk is the current nominee with Councillor McGuinness beside him. I do understand that Councillor Chalk is desiring to continue with that nomination. So I would propose that nomination from the chair, that Councillor Chalk and Councillor McGuinness continue in that capacity.
Yes, Chair, one of us, we do a bit of a tag team there. At least one of us always go along to the meetings.
Thank you. Northern Rivers Joint Organisation, I note the position vacant. Councillor Swanborough has advised he's not able to continue in that capacity. Seek a nomination.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to nominate Councillor McConnell, please.
Councillor McConnell?
I accept, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, any other nominations? Then we note that and move forward. Now, the Regional Skills Investment Strategy Reference Group does have a finite life, but it does need to continue at the moment. And we currently have nominees, Councillor McConnell, Councillor McGuinness with Councillor West as proxy. Seek nominations.
Same again. You've been.
Can I nominate myself and Councillor McGuinness again? Is that?
You can nominate, and we'll ask you if you're happy to accept.
And yeah, no, it's just, well, no one was speaking up.
Could I as the proxy?
Okay, so maintain the status quo is what I'm hearing there. You're comfortable with that, Councillor McGuinness? Yes. Noting there is a finite life to that group at this stage. The Audit and Risk Committee, again, Councillor Swamborough has advised he's not able to continue in that capacity, and I do require, I am appointed via the terms of reference, so that's an automatic, but I do need one other councillor, and ideally a proxy. Typically, the Deputy Mayor assumes the role of proxy. However, I look for a nomination for the Audit and Risk Committee.
Yeah, I nominate Councillor Enright for that, Mayor.
Councillor?
Yes, I'd accept that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other nominations for Audit and Risk?
Nominate Councillor McConnell as a proxy.
You happy to accept that role, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We note that. Any other nominations? We move to the Regional Arts Development Fund Committee. Note that previously Councillor Enright has been the appointee on that with Councillor McConnell as proxy. Seek nominations.
I'm happy to nominate Councillor Enright and Councillor McConnell if he's as the proxy.
Councillor Enright?
Accept that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor McConnell?
Accepted, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The Tourism Advisory Committee, which again may have a finite life, but at present has Councillor Enright, Councillor Swamborough and Councillor West as nominees. I seek nominees to go forward.
I'm happy to step in for Councillor Swamborough on that one, if we want to stay the same.
Sorry.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Enright and myself, if I may, too, please.
Yep. So, sorry, Councillor McConnell, you're nominating yourself to
fill in for Councillor Swamborough while he deals with his issue. You'll come back later on.
So, for this 12-month period, you're saying, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Right. So 3 nominees there, depending on, and noting that that is also subject to future review of the existence of that body. Scenic Valleys Regional Roads and Transport Group. Currently, Councillor West represents there.
Have to nominate Councillor West to continue in that role.
Comfortable with that? Then, any other nominations? Council of Mayors Economic Development Working Group.
Can I just, on that, the roads one, the last one, there's no need for a proxy?
We haven't had one in the past.
We've never had one. And
Yeah. I just note that
them.
every other one we
Yeah.
seem to have a proxy, so I just, no, okay, all good, thank you.
sorry, the General Manager might want to mention something about that.
Yes, generally, the meetings are rearranged that those that are nominated can make it to the event or the meetings as they're held.
Thank you.
We note, we move to the Economic Development Working Group. Current nominee has been Councillor McGuinness with Councillor Chalk as proxy. Seek nominations.
Happy to nominate Councillor McGuinness in that role with the proxy of Councillor Chalk.
Presuming Councillor Chalk will be comfortable as proxy, but Councillor McGuinness? Yeah. And the special interest group, which was the Rural Community Special Interest Group, which isn't active, but if it were to become active again, previously Councillor McGuinness has sat in that capacity. Seek a nominee.
I just wonder how many years after it stops.
I'm Councillor, I'm actually happy to leave that void because there is, I think, should it be reactivated, we could have a suitable discussion to participate. Would you be comfortable with that?
And while those meetings were quite reasonable, I think it must be 3, if not 4 years since there's been a meeting, so it's a bit
2018 was the last meeting, correct?
Yeah.
Do you want to just put the nomination in? Just to satisfy this, President.
And it doesn't worry me, the name there, but it's just let people know it's a long time since I've met. And
So
they changed the structure basically, so you don't have those things anymore.
There isn't an officer in that. So you're happy to nominate Councillor McGuinness again?
Yes,
Councillor?
Mayor, I think just for completeness.
So I think that is the table that had requirements for approval via council from the examination of the much longer list previously. So we now come to the resolution of those matters, and just
Section just removing related to the appointment of the deputy mayor. Oh, that's in a separate. It's been dealt with separately.
Yep, no, it's been dealt with as a separate resolution, Councillor. Okay, councillors, there's a resolution in 4 parts. I'll ask the CEO to introduce those components.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 4-part resolution that in accordance with the respective nominations list above, the councillors be appointed council's representatives on the internal and external committees and forums. 2, council endorse the amendment of the schedule of councillor representation on committees and forums, in brackets attachment 1 to this report, for the ordinary minutes to include the duly nominated councillor representatives. 3, the council acknowledge that these appointments will be reviewed annually in accordance with council's resolution from the ordinary meeting held on 25th of May 2020. And 4, council advise the organisations of the respective appointed councillor representatives.
CK mover. Councillor McConnell. CK, any further questions to the motion before we...
Mayor, could I just be rather pedantic here? And the recommendation that was written was saying May 21 to April 22, and then reviewed annually. Review these appointments annually. Is that what we want, given that that's 11 months and then 12 months from then on? I know the words up on the board are now different to what was in written, but maybe we have to change a word there.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm dealing with the resolution in front of me as opposed to what might be in the report. And this is in the context of our prior resolution, which referred to these as annual reviews, and that's the process that we've agreed to continue. And that's because of the nature of when meetings falls, that's a nominal period to try and get us reasonably close to that 12-month window as possible. That is clearly the intent from our original motion. Is there other clarity that you require?
No, I was raising from a clarity point of view for those online who would not have may not have seen this, they're reading off of the recommendation, and that's actually been changed. As long as people are aware of that it's been changed, those wordings from an annual to 11 months. Sorry, I am being rather pedantic, but it is different.
So the resolution of when the next review takes place, I understand your question, Councillor. The clarity is we've run very late with this process because of those additional questions and thoughts from councillors that the CEO described was trying to collect. And but we have hit the same trigger point as this appointment last year, is my understanding, because of the timing of resolving election outcomes for the committees, maybe not for the deputy mayor. We're probably a little bit behind that. The deputy mayor was a fraction earlier because of the way it was dealt with last year. But we're now we've streamlined the process as discussed earlier to try and ensure that we can make it a more efficient process moving forward. The clarification of the specific timing cannot be resolved further today. It isn't defined in here. It may be a matter that we need to bring back for information to councillors for clarity at a future date. I think that's the comment. Does that help?
Yeah, no. It was for clarification of people online more than anything, that they understood what we actually were doing. When they read the recommendation, there was a difference there.
Yeah, the recommendations changed quite significantly now.
Sorry, there was an ambiguous. It was ambiguous in the way it was written. The recommendation. 11 months, but saying annually. Yeah.
So we have a.
As long as this is read out and people understand what it is, I think it will be right.
So we have a mover. We have a seeker seconder, Councillor McGuinness. Do we wish to read the full
Mr. Mayor?
content for clarity, please?
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I'll be moving an amendment to the.
So can we just read it out again, please, CEO, in full, just to refocus after that discussion?
That in accordance with the respective nominations list above, the councillors be appointed council's representatives on the internal and external committees and forums. 2, council endorse the amendment of the schedule of councillor representation on committees and forums in brackets attachment 1 to this report for the ordinary minutes to include the duly nominated councillor representatives. 3, council acknowledge that these appointments will be reviewed annually in accordance with council's resolution from the ordinary meeting held on 25th of May 2020. And 4, council advise the organisations of the respective appointed councillor representatives.
Okay, that's the motion as we have it at the moment. Now, Councillor Swanborough, you're wanting to propose an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I propose that there be a point number 5, and that it should read that the appointment of Deputy Mayor shall be undertaken separate to the appointment of external committees and forums. In that the vote should be taken for the position conditionally upon all council members being present.
We have a seconder for the...
Could I ask a question first, Mayor?
Yes.
Of Councillor Swanborough. I think your words there leave a little bit to be desired in that people, if someone takes sick on the morning, you actually can't do it. Maybe you should have with pre-approved leave or something like that. Yeah.
I'm happy for you to make an amendment to my...
So we can't deal with an amendment to the amendment, Councillor. So
right.
We have an amendment. Have we further questions to the proposed amendment? We have a proposal. We haven't seconded yet. So further questions?
My question, Mayor, might be directed to the CEO, but can I have a clearer understanding of our current standing orders in relation to dealing with absent councillors and the process that we have agreed to as a part of our standing orders in how to proceed?
Effectively, the standing orders provide that a quorum needs to be present in order for council to operate. I guess that's point one. There is an ability under standing orders for a councillor who perhaps is unable to attend the chambers to attend with permission from the chair 3 days prior to 3 business days prior to the meeting to attend by teleconference or telephone conference or the like. That's a newer provision, but it's in our standing orders. Does that answer the question, Councillor Enright?
In part, and the process to handle where we have an even number, or an even number of voters, and the process to handle potential equal votes. Is that dealt with in our existing standing orders?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
There's certainly the ability for the mayor to utilise a casting vote in the event of a tie.
Thank you for those clarifications, Councillor. Now, I still no further clarifications. Seek a seconder to the amendment. Councillor McConnell has indicated his seconder. Councillor Swanbury, you wish to speak to your proposed amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's pretty self-explanatory. I think even in the event of sickness or someone not being able to attend, we have a fortnightly meeting cycle, and something like that can easily be deferred for a fortnight. The sky's not going to fall in under the circumstances. And I just think this is what the public would expect, that there would be a fair and equitable process set out whereby all members will always be present when we take a vote for the important position of Deputy Mayor. So that's the intent of the resolution. I don't intend to muddy the waters on it anymore. It's clear, it's equitable. I think it serves our responsibilities and the standard of behaviours for councillors, and it's in accordance with our code of conduct. So I commend the amendment to you.
Anyone wishing to speak against the proposed amendment? Councillor Enright?
Not speaking against, just would like to be able to see the amendment, the wording, if that's possible.
Sorry, we just a problem with the system for that.
About the term council members,
I'm not playing with the wording. It's the amendment. The amendment's been proposed as it's been proposed. Anyone else? Anyone wishing to speak against?
Can I just ask the CEO, is there a proper term that should have been used instead of council members? Is that
Could have been all elected councillors, I would have thought, but.
does
potentially mayor and councillors? We're just wondering also about elected members. It's whether councillors believe that that's clear, and councillors.
Look, it's clear to me, but it may not be clear to everybody. So I'm more than happy to change it upon all elected councillors being present.
Yeah.
Technically should be reversed, but I shall exercise discretion to allow that amendment on the way through. No one wishing to speak against. Thank you, Councillor West.
Sorry, Mayor. Look, I'm not sort of violently opposed to it, but it's certainly in the standing orders. Item 10.1 and 10.2 does say very clearly that someone who is absent can either telephone in or teleconference in. So, that was an option. The other thing I just want to add is that currently we're reviewing the Deputy Mayor position on an annual basis. So if there are others around the table who are keen to put their name forward for that position, there are going to be other opportunities in the next 2 years.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for the amendment? Councillor McGuinness.
Mayor, on balance, I'll vote for the motion, but I would have liked, I do worry a bit that, if there happens to be one member, it could roll on for a number of meetings and one member absent. That's very unlikely, I concede, but it's actually, making sure you've got everyone. And I think Councillor West makes a good point. And we probably should make more use of it, that we can phone in for the meeting at any rate. So, we should be, so I should probably take advantage of that. If it's in the rules, we should be doing it.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak against? I will speak against. I think this is a dangerous precedent because it creates the possibility that if someone does have a significant period of ill health, you're just crippling the ability to deal with this matter of council. And, the state have carefully considered the requirements. The state have very carefully considered a whole range of factors in the way they've provided the legislative framework for council to operate, as well as what they've proposed and given to us, particularly around these issues from a standing orders point of view. It is very, it is very probable that there will be times where a council will be away either by planning or by emergency, and will miss parts of the business of council. The obligation we have is to continue to deal with all facets of the business of council, regardless of that, so long as we have a proper quorum. That's what the legislation clearly expects of us, and that's a non-political point of view. That is a clear strategic process point of view that we're required to properly consider. Anyone else wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor McCollum.
Mayor, could I just ask, following on from that, could I ask the CEO, if you do not seek leave of absence for whatever reason, are you considered still to be an elected member at that meeting? Point of clarification.
You're still.
So you're saying in the instance where a councillor doesn't attend a meeting despite, or where they haven't made any attempt to inform the chair that they will be absent?
That's right.
Yeah, my understanding is that that there is a limit on the number of occasions where a councillor can do that. I think that number is three successive meetings of absence. A councillor also, though, in the situation where they haven't applied in advance for a leave of absence, so an illness that morning, can make contact, and the mayor can grant leave under exceptional circumstances, and we have had to undertake that, or the mayor's had to undertake that action in recent times.
And I would have thought that's a different thing to if I decide to go overseas and don't tell anybody for 6 months, we don't want the business of council being held up, because I would think there's laws there that you have to consider your position, basically.
Councillor, I'm going to curtail it there so we don't get into a debate of it. I think the question's been asked and answered. Councillor McConnell, did you wish to speak for the amendment?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak for the motion. I think the appointment of deputy mayor is still council business, but I think it's something that everyone should have the ability to either nominate or vote on. And considering that Councillor Chalk is away in a place where he can't get connectivity through the phone, he would have been able to attend via phone link. So I'll be voting for this motion.
Anyone else wishing to speak against? Councillor, you wish to have any final word?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened to the various questions and debates and on this particular issue, and I still believe that the motion is sound. However, if it was defeated, I would propose a different amendment to prevent what's happened today from reoccurring again. But look, it's an important thing. It's the Deputy Mayor's position. There's only 7 of us around this table, and it's very unlikely that there's going to be many times, there hasn't been in the last 12 months, where there's been people absent from this meeting. You know, everybody gets here, everybody knows their obligations, and it's only under exceptional circumstances that they don't attend. And so I think it's a democratic way of doing things. I don't know why anybody would be scared of the fact that I'm only trying to make a situation where everybody around this table, you know, benefits. Everybody will benefit from this recommendation, because it could be one day that you know, someone else misses out if we go down the same path as what we've done before, and I just don't think the public want to see that happen.
We put the motion, those in, the amendment, proposed amendment, those in favour? Those against? The amendment is divided equally, and I will cast a vote against it on the basis of upholding the processes that are clarified by the state as being appropriate. Excuse me,
Mr. Mayor. There's nothing in the standing orders that allow you to comment on the result of an amendment. I'd ask you to refrain from making those comments.
Councillor, I'm clarifying why I'm making my casting vote. Okay, that's all, Councillor. And that's all I'm trying to do, is because there isn't a gallery, so my casting vote is against. I'm sure you will request a division.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Divisions 1, 2 and 6 for, divisions 3, 4 and Mayor against, and Mayor casting vote. The amendment is lost. Can we move back to the original motion? And it is moved, it is seconded. Now can we proceed on? Councillor McConnell, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Does anyone wish to speak against the motion in its 4 parts? Anyone else wish to speak additionally to the motion? We put the motion. Those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move on to the next item before us, which is item 10.2, council sustainability. And GM, we ask you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10.2 for consideration today is the adoption of the 2021-22 fees and charges. Now, this process forms part of the overall 2021-22 budget process, and it's as a requirement as part of Division 3, Section 169 of the Local Government Regulation. The purpose, more importantly, the adoption of the fees and charges is brought earlier than the rest of the budget process, is to allow the administrative processes associated with updating respective forms and everything else, so that these can be applicable as of 1 July. Now, a bit of background, I take the report as being read. A bit of background to this is that the fees and charges, annually there's a comprehensive review undertaken by officers, and this includes the indexation of the standard fees and charges as per long-term financial model assumptions. It's important, a bit of context with the fees and charges. The revenue that council ascertains from the fees and charges, historically that amounts to around approximately about 6% of our total operating income. And this year's budget, the revenue forecasted for this year's fees and charges, there's actually a slight, a 1.2% reduction in the December budget review of the current fees and charges. And to be indicated in a further report, as of the April monthly financial, the year-to-date revenue for the 2020-21 fees and charges is approximately about 4.9 million, just to give some context around what that volume is associated with the fees and charges. Outside of that, Mr. Mayor, I seek further clarity around some of the aspects of the report from
Councillors. You've had access to this. It's obviously a fair bit of content in the register. Questions for clarification to the GM?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager. On page 57 of our report, in a subsequent item, which is in the open session of Council, the original Council budget for fees and charges was $4.8 million, and that was for the year. We are up to now, for the 9-month period, $4.9 million. We are $700,000 ahead of schedule at this point in time. I predict we'll probably be $1 million ahead of budget by the time this year is finished. I wonder if you could comment. Those comments you made didn't seem to indicate that.
We're probably jumping ahead of the meeting report, Councillor, but it's in that report. It clearly indicates around higher than anticipated revenue from infrastructure charges, 1.8 million.
So it's just one single item, infrastructure charges, that's attributed to that?
Yes, that's correct. So,
but just a question on that, but isn't that still a fee and charge?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to predict fees and charges, obviously the development, but I'm delving into the April report, and we can certainly include those comments in there. The fees and charges contained in the schedule are your everyday, your general fees and charges, and the premise of the way they're calculated is obviously on a recovery basis. So council doesn't go out. There are certain activities that council is the only one that can undertake, and yeah, we're mandated by the regulations to undertake those on a cost recovery basis. So in standard other areas, that's normal. It's hard to predict if we get a bumper year when it comes to applications and everything being submitted. That's certainly a bonus on the budget, but it's hard. We don't want to sugarcoat budget expectations and not necessarily meet them.
GM, can I just ask a supplementary question? I asked Councillor Swamborough to turn microphones off when not speaking so we can let others in. GM, a supplementary question. Infrastructure charges, without going into the report, the timing of infrastructure charges being paid, is that a matter within Council's control or within the decision time frame of those with approvals?
Sorry, Mayor.
The question is with regard to infrastructure charges, which was singled out, without talking about the detail of the report, the timing of those payments and purpose of those payments being received, but the time in particular, is that a matter of Council's control or the decision of those with approvals about when they're proceeding?
It's a combination of both, Mayor, and generally infrastructure charges are due at the commencement of use. And I guess the subject to that comment would be that Council put in investment attraction policy recently where developers may ask for a deferral of fees, and that is a negotiated agreement then with the developer. So it will depend on the commencement of use of those developments as to when those fees are actually collected by Council.
Thank you for that clarification.
So it's very difficult to predict.
Thank you. Further points for clarification, councillors? Councillor Enright, will you look?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In response to Councillor Swanborough's question and the GM's reply, without going too much into the financial report,
just ask for
point of order,
clarification.
Mr. Mayor.
Just ask for the clarification, Councillor.
Yeah,
please.
There was a significant increase in building and plumbing fees collected, and my understanding is that was from an external contributor by the federal government to assist post-COVID impacts. Is that your understanding of that increase in that particular area as well?
I'll look to one of the GMs.
I'm not quite sure about the reference to the federal government in that statement, but what I can say is we have seen an increase in building and plumbing and DA applications during this last 12 to 18 months, and we've been reporting a steady climb, and we've seen a jump up in March and we've seen another jump up in April. And I suppose, without knowing completely, that may be due to some of the incentives offered by the federal government, but I can't quantify that here and now.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any other clarifications? Councillor McGuinness?
Yeah, just one last comment on that. It's good to see those on the right side rather than the wrong side. So
we'll talk about that in the finance report. Let's come back to
I said one last comment. Yeah.
Yes.
Could I suggest that there's I've lost the page now, in the Culbar Civic Centre, it is now, has been for a number of years, been leased out to the Fassifern Lions, and my understanding is that council doesn't receive rent from that. So I wouldn't think it should be there. Was it 3 of 36, I thought, but I moved the page. But Culbar Civic Centre, if that could be, my understanding is that it's, yep.
Just to clarify that point, I guess whilst it's listed there, and we may not charge that relevant body, I guess that forms part of council's community service obligations. So it's like where we internally use our normal facilities to maintain that asset in whole. There will still be, we charge ourselves to use the centre, but that forms basis of it. But in this aspect, I guess if that may form part of the community service obligation that council forgoes necessary revenue associated with that as per the standard agreements that council has in place.
Thank you for that clarification. Does that provide clarity, Councillor, that it's really for an accounting process?
Councillor Enright. Question, if I may, to the GM. I note that generally, in line with long-term financial forecasts, that the increase is 3%, give or take a little bit for rounding. I also note, in comparison to the previous fees and charges, that occasional fee have been reduced and sometimes significantly. And I ask the process of assessing the correct amount of fees and charges that apply to those particular instances and the reasons for a review or a reduction.
Thanks, Councillor Enright. As mentioned before, I guess we're mandated to ensure our fees and charges are on a cost recovery basis. So officers will undertake where there has been efficiencies, and I believe there was a indication around the building and plumbing, some of the efficiencies that could be associated with that in terms of inspections and everything else. So there's an ability to continue to review how we're charging, how we undertake our operations, and I mean, obviously, as part of our mandate to keep in line with legislations, it should always be at the forefront around maintaining the cost recovery, not on a commercial basis.
Thanks for that clarification. Any other clarifications to the fees and charges? If not, we have a recommendation. I ask you to introduce the recommendation, GM.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for item 10.2 is that pursuant to sections 97(1) and section 2623C of the Local Government Act 2009, Council adopt the 2021-2022 Register of Fees and Charges contained as Attachment 1.
Thank you. Mover, Councillor McInnes. Any additional questions? Then I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Wish to speak further, Councillor McGuinness?
No, I'm right. Thanks, Mayor.
Anyone wishing to speak against?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak against. Mr. Mayor, a 3% rise at this point in time is something that I would be opposed to, simply because I'm not convinced that we've had a 3% rise in our cost base of delivering those services. And as the General Manager has said, you know, that is the only basis really. We try and match the cost of delivering the service with the price of the service. The problem with these, you know, long-term plan where we foreshadow a 3% every year increase in fees and charges is that that's cumulative. You know, it's exponential. You know, you have 3% one year, then you have 3% and 3% the next year, etc., etc. So my feeling is that those cumulative rises as they compound, you know, really separate that nexus between the cost of delivery of services and the price that we're asking our residents to pay. And to me, that's not justified, and I don't think it's going to be justified in the eyes of the public. Now, the argument that we continually review our cost base and we adjust the level of fees and charges is good that we do that. However, it also indicates that we're not controlling our costs, because we feel it necessary that the council cost base has gone up 3%. And I ask the question, well, why has our cost base gone up 3%? You know, when we've had very low levels of interest rates and inflation, I just don't see the justification for that. And when I look at the financial statements, I see, you know, I see coming up that, you know, our operating expenses for this year at the moment are $5.5 million below expenditure. And our cash is growing at a phenomenal rate of $16 million higher than expected at the moment. So, you know, as far as revenue, I don't think increasing revenue is the answer. I think we need to be looking at the other side of the question and saying, how can we decrease our costs? How do we work smarter? And we need to learn to do more with less. And when I see the cost base reflecting, you know, downwards, I understand that that would be an indication to me that we're achieving efficiencies. But when I see the cost base going up at greater than inflation, it makes me worry about where we're headed. That's why I'll be voting against this 3% increase.
Point of clarification. The report doesn't talk about 3% across everything. It talks about a recovery based on, and I understand from your dialogue, just for clarification, that it's not a blanket 3% increase. It's actually a review process that has identified where there is a change in the cost structure that requires an increase or to hold the same. Could you please clarify that question?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. Part of that review process undertook that exercise of some fees didn't go up at all whatsoever, just on the basis of set surrounding and the notions around that. I will add that you know, there are a number of factors taken into account of that 3%. Whilst that's an arbitrary figure, we do take into account the inflation. I've never, in my short time, never seen inflation go negative to be reduced. We've noted people's electricity prices. Council pays electricity, council pays utility charges. So all those associated.
You've clarified the point enough. We've had a speaker against. Anyone wishing to speak for the recommendation? If not, before I hand back to the mover, I will speak for the recommendation. We shouldn't be confused, councillors, between what's happening in a particular year about the usage of various things and the payment profile that's coming in. That would be doing a disservice to the proper respect of what this document is about. This is about identifying a reasonable cost recovery basis for a range of activities so that we mitigate the impact on our broader ratepayer base who aren't necessarily using those specific services. That's the intent of the fees and charges, to provide that user pays type approach on a cost recovery basis. There will be years where there will be higher usage of certain services, which will see some increased revenue in those areas. However, it will also take additional cost to serve. And therefore, you need to look at the whole package rather than just pull particular items out and try to exaggerate them. The fees and charges is a place of reference for what's a reasonable cost recovery basis for what we charge for services, so that we can mitigate the impact of people having that user pays experience against the other ratepayers who don't access those particular specialist services. And I'm supportive of this motion. Anyone else wishing to speak against? If not, I hand back to the mover.
Yes, Mayor, I think it's about user pays as close as possible to what we can have it, and I think it is reasonable. There are, as you just pointed out there too, there's some times when it shows quite a good profit in some things, but I've seen more losses than profits along the way. So it's I think management, it is a budget, and they have to decide at this time of year what it's going to be like in the 12 months for the fees and charges, and I think it's somewhat reasonable. I don't disagree with Councillor Swanborough. I think when local government inflation running at 1.5%, I think we have to be careful putting 3% across the board, and this is not there in every case, and it has to pay for itself. I recommend the motion to fellow councillors.
Thank you. We now put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Councillor Swanborough has requested a division. Those in favour? Divisions 2, 3, 4, 6 and Mayor. Those against? Division 1. We move to item 10.3, and again, GM, ask you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 10.3 is the April monthly financial report that provides an analysis of where council sits as of 30th of April 2021. I take the report as having been read and certainly await seeking of clarity around some matters, but I do have a couple of notes that I would like to provide as part of the readings into the report. It does indicate, again, Mr. Mayor, that there's a net operating surplus of 6.239 million as of April. I will, as per previous, indicate or provide that, you know, of that amount, there's about $1.367 million that relates to wages and salaries that can be capitalised, not just including the current vacancies, but there's $1.367 million of capital works where council can capitalise the wages, salaries and wages component of underspend, and that's consistent with where we are with how we went in detail at the last monthly report in our progress with the capital delivery. Having read some commentary out and about in the public, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a reference to page 4 of the report, attached report, which includes the statement of financial position. it does indicate there that we have a cash balance of 52.421 million. But I'll provide clarity in that whilst there is $52.42 million, if you take into account what Council's committed to in the current capital works program, there's about $34 million of underspend in that, which means you take that away from that cash, there's $18.3 million left in cash. And if you take away the provisions that we have to maintain as part of employee long leave and all those other types of balances, again, that equates to about $10 million as reflected in the balance sheet. You're left with $8.3 million in working capital, which is actually probably a little bit behind schedule where we would like to be. But that just provides clarity that whilst we've got $52.42 million in cash sitting in our bank, the vast majority of that is restricted cash. One of my particular highlights is again around the council expenditure by location. The month of April saw council expend about $3.5 million in contestable expenditure, and of that $1.1 million was expended in scenic rim businesses. Again, that represents about 31.4% of our monthly spend in scenic rim associated businesses. From our rates data perspective, we've seen the rates outstanding amount reduced by about 902,000 from March, and 820,000 of that relates to the current levy. And Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to point that page 9 and 10, we've taken courtesy to incorporate.
Can you just give us the, we just need to get the page number.
63 and 64 of the report.
Yes.
We've taken the liberty now to include a couple of other reporting just to provide additional clarity as to some of these. You can see that Appendix 1A is the capital revenue. I'll just go through the columns because it's the first time we've gone through them in detail. Is you can see that from when we originally adopted the budget back in July 2020, we only had an anticipated $13 million in capital revenue associated with grants. Now at the revised budget, which the last one undertaken was as of December, that's gone. That's basically doubled. That's an indication of the grants that have come in. That council has been successful in obtaining and offsetting some of our expenditure. Appendix 1B, that again, that's a further report that shows some grant funded expenditure that's associated. Probably the key one, Mr. Mayor, is on page 64 of the report, and that goes around the capital expenditure. We've fielded a number of questions in monthly reports around our delivery and how the position of capital expenditure has come about. We've taken the liberty there now to include how the capital budget has progressed over the financial year. You can see when we adopted the budget back in July 2020, we originally adopted a capital budget of $22.434 million. The second column includes the carry forward budgets once we did a full reconciliation of the 2019-20 financial year. There was an amount of $24 million carry forward to give us a total at that time of $46 million, the annual plus carry forwards. Subsequent budget reviews listed there, the September and December budget reviews, has seen that grown another $13 million to $53 million. But that should be, you should be able to then correlate that with Appendix 1A with the capital revenue of increased capital grants by $13 million to show that there's an increased expenditure there of a similar accord. And the last metric there is just around asset sales with near completion with the Bowness Enterprise Precinct. We thought we'd put it there in terms of indicating the as a key indicator around our ability to once that's manageable and up for disposal, then our ability to turn those lots over so that they return back to council in terms of cash.
Thank you. Open for clarifications, is that right?
That's correct.
I just start with one clarification. That carry forward amount on page 64, that includes carry forwards of multi-year
That's correct.
projects, not just
for the 1920, but 1920 included any of those that are subsequently from the previous years before that. So it's that point in time.
Just a question on that. Could you tell me how much of that would be carryovers from projects that are going more than one financial year? Like how many projects that are going for 2 or 3 financial years? What's the value of those that have been carried forward?
So I probably can't give you a full detail in terms of dollar cents today, but take that notice. But I'll certainly look at fellow General Manager, Asset and Environmental Sustainability to provide some commentary around that.
Through the Mayor, I certainly would take that on notice. Certainly there are other items today that may be discussed that can shed some light on that as well.
Thank you.
But formulating this report has taken those metrics into consideration of those number of different years, so that data can be presented, but it's just not relevant in this format.
My next question would be in relation to capital works. Is it likely that we are going to have a similar or larger carry forward into the next financial year of uncompleted works?
At this stage, we're probably looking at a similar amount, but as previously mentioned, a number of those are multi-year projects. There will be a handful, though, of projects that have been deferred or delayed as a result of unforeseen circumstances. We also will acknowledge that we did get a reasonable rain event around March that did slow some of our progress on some sites, which here today you may think a 4-week delay or having to redivert resources to get our road network and other facilities in a more appropriately working condition or a safer outcome certainly does impact, and 1 month is about equivalent to somewhere near 10% of your ability to move forward. So we certainly at that late stage in the year, it's quite complex to mobilise additional resources to be able to pick up that timeline. So there will be some projects that will carry over into next year, but there is certainly a number that are multi-stage or multifaceted projects.
Part of that detailed process, I mean, we will go through that process. So it's just not an automatic carry forward. There is a process associated with identifying those and providing the key rationale around the carry forwards of those. So.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Swanborough's question there to the GM, do we budget for any rain? Because I look back in March as not being a significant rain event, and a normal wet season. I take your point that it's a little bit later than some, often we might have it in January, February, but surely we have to, every year we get some rain, or are we budgeting on no rain at all for the year? I'm being facetious there.
I'll extend, through the Mayor, I'll extend your question slightly and answer a little more. We do actually make an allocation within our budget for wet weather that we can actually book downtime for staff. So that's first part of a technical process that we follow. The second part is, yes, we do, in every project, we certainly make an allowance for delays, whether it be as a result of wet weather or whether it be as a result of an unforeseen finding of a service or an incident that has actually, or an issue that's actually led to some level of delay. In saying that, with that, part of what happened in March was that it's more than just the rain event itself that actually was for the period of a week or so that impacted our projects. It was the fact that we had some reasonable damage and interruption to the level of service provided by our assets that diverted some crews away from their capital project for a period of about 3 to 4 weeks on top of that. So unfortunately, we've seen quite a, over the last 10 years of my career, as opposed to the previous 10 years, the frequency and the magnitude of those events and their impacts on the service level to our community through our road network has actually increased to a point where we are actually looking at how to build that more into our programming. So there's a fairly long-winded answer to your question, but yes, we certainly make an allowance for what is an average year. But unfortunately, our average year, if it took the last 10 years, is actually having a bigger impact on our program than the previous 10 years.
Can I just ask a supplementary to that clarification of Councillor McGuinness's? Thanks for that clarity on the diversion to emergent works and recovery works. How will they be shown through in our financial reporting?
So in the financial reporting, they actually come as a capital grant and a capital line item. So with the March event, we're still putting the information together, but at this point in time, we're looking of the order of around $3 million worth of work required to be undertaken. That's the high level figures, with the team still putting the numbers together. That on top of the event that we had prior financial year, which was of the order of about $2.3 million. So we certainly, there are substantial impacts to our road network.
Thank you. And just to the GM Council Sustainability, those values will have been shown as unbudgeted amounts, which will show up in the next review. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. We have undertaken a March budget review for the purposes of preparing for the 21-22 budget. If those announcements around that particular works has been announced, then they will certainly be reflected in those papers accordingly. And Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to take the opportunity to, I certainly caught off the hop previously in the previous item, but just to correct a question from Councillor Swanborough around the fees and charges. I mixed the bottom lines up, so that what I did indicate before was around infrastructure charge, but it should have been the building and plumbing charges. So what came out of my mouth in memory was the infrastructure, but that should have been building and plumbing around in the order of about 700,000 as what's contained in the report, that we're ahead of schedule. That's why. Just make that clarification.
Thank you for that clarification. Is that helpful, Councillor?
Oh, look, I understand and accept the General Manager's word on that.
Thank you. Further clarification to the report. And thank you to the GM for providing that additional breakdown and explanation, because sometimes people like to take a big headline number without understanding what sits under it, and unpacking that is an important visibility for the community. It's greatly appreciated. We have a recommendation then, councillors. GM, you'd introduce the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for item 10.3 today is that Council endorse the monthly financial report for April 2021. I
seek a mover. Councillor Swanborough. I seek any further questions? If not, I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Councillor Swanborough, do you wish to speak to the motion? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone wishing to speak additionally? Not, we put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We have two confidential matters before us to discuss. Items 11.1 regarding the South East Queensland Community Stimulus Program funding, and that's closed subject to 254J3C, and item 11.2, which is the 2020-21 Infrastructure Capital Works Program Delivery Q3 reporting. That's closed under section 254J3C also. Councillors, I seek a motion to move into closed session in accordance with our policy and procedure relating to closed meetings and the relevant provisions of 254J3. Local Government Regulations 2012. Councillor Enright, anyone wishing to ask a question? Anyone? A seconder? I thought I had Councillor McGuinness there. Then,
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move a procedural motion.
please elaborate, Councillor.
The procedural motion is that in relation to 11.2 in the confidential report, that this matter lie on the table pending advice from the Department of Local Government as to Council's ability to do this in closed session.
I'm curious, Councillor, I would like more clarification of why you do not
Mr.
believe
Mayor,
that's a budget
sure.
matter.
Yeah, sure. The all of the council and everybody in this room, I think, have been involved in at least two sessions, one with the LGAQ and the other with the Department of Local Government, explaining, you know, what this particular section 254J 3C means when it talks about consideration of the council budget. And it's always been that it's about the preparation of the budget, and it's not about what we're about to discuss, which is the Infrastructure Capital Works Program delivery, Q3 reporting. And so I just feel very uncomfortable that I would be breaking a law or a rule, and that we'd all be susceptible to the code of conduct that says, you know, we have to make decisions in open council meetings, and we have to comply with law and policy, and we have to uphold the system of local government and relevant laws applicable. And I just don't think we have the authority to go into a closed session to discuss Infrastructure Capital Works Program delivery, Q3 reporting. So that's the reason.
CEO, I'll ask for clarity. My understanding of having read the report is that the reason is that it relates to the consideration of variations and reallocations to approved budget allocations, and therefore that's a budget-related matter that does warrant that consideration. And we do have the opportunity then for that to to consider the making of that public once that consideration, those variations, is undertaken. And I understand that that process of variations is considered within the legislation. Can you provide guidance?
That's my understanding in terms of the discussions around the budget. And as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, the intention here is that the report is released publicly after these discussions have occurred with councillors.
Just a question to the CEO in relation to that matter. Mr. CEO, you said the intention is to release this report. Are you talking about releasing the whole report, part of the report, sections of the report, or are you saying you're going to release the whole report?
The intention is to release the report.
That is the whole report?
The report is the report, Councillor.
So the answer is yes?
Councillor Fook, you're making an awkward piece because we haven't resolved. It is up to us. Point of clarification, it is up to us to consider that as part of the closed matter. The matter clearly does relate to variations to the budget, and therefore it does satisfy that requirement, and therefore we then have the process of deliberating what we as councillors will come forward and put forward as our resolution of what to release. That's the process.
Mr Mayor, the report talks about variations to the current budget. It does not talk about variations to next year's budget. And that's my point. And I think everybody in this room should understand that we've been advised on 2 occasions now. So we go into this particular decision with our eyes wide open. I can tell you the dates when we were advised about those 2 things by the department and by the LGAQ. And we need to understand that the budget exemption for going into closed session relates to the future budget. It doesn't relate to the current budget or the progress of our capital works expenditure.
I believe you believe it relates to budget. I don't believe legislation talks about future budget. It refers to budget. So, Councillor, I note your proposed amendment to exclude the item.
Can I just ask a question? If we're going to release the report or the full report, why are we doing it in confidential?
Because it's a budget consideration for us to approve, to agree with, review and approve, to then to discuss that and then bring it out into the open. That's just the process.
So how does the public get to hear what we discuss then?
Well,
if we're going to release it, I'm just.
Well, Councillor,
yeah, I know. Bear with me.
The legislation clearly allows for certain conversations not to be heard by the public, respectfully, and to hear the clarification, the decision about what is released is up to us, and the release of what those deliberations result in and what those changes may be is then up to us to consider how best that is communicated, and without talking too much about what's still in a closed agenda, I'm confident that we'll have an appetite for that to be visible. But I can't preempt the decision of the meeting. We have a proposed amendment to exclude 11.2 from consideration today. I seek a seconder to that, Councillor McConnell.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, it's a procedural motion.
Sorry, procedural
and
motion.
it doesn't need a
seconder. My apologies. It's just lost my way there for a moment. Procedural motion moved by Councillor Swanborough. Councillor, you wish to speak to your procedural motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'm just concerned for everybody around this room because clearly it's been advised to all of us on 2 occasions, very, very clearly, and it's been advised to me from the Department of Local Government itself that this particular provision only applies to consideration of the preparation of the future budget. We've heard that twice so far, and it seems to be falling on deaf ears, or there's not a willingness to understand that and just push ahead. Well, we've been told, I believe it'll be against the code of conduct for everybody who votes on this particular issue, because unless we actually find out before we discuss it, you know, what the views of the department are. I already know what the views of the department are, but I'm just giving you fair notice that, you know, we cannot do what we propose to do. It's in the law, and we would be breaking the law if we went ahead with this.
Councillor, a question, please. You've just referred to having advice from the department. Can you share that advice with the table?
Yes, the advice was last time this came up, Mr Mayor,
Councillor,
and the advice was that this particular section only applies to the preparation of future budgets, not to consideration of amendments to an existing budget. The budget's already been adopted. There's no provision for us to go into a confidential session and hide this information of how we're performing against the current budget in the legislation. Now, that's been made clear to us on many occasions now, and it's very clear to me.
Councillor, I didn't ask you to restate what you've already stated. Can you give it to us in writing? You keep referring to having this advice. Do you have it in writing?
I got a verbal advice from the department.
So just for clarity, we don't know what the question was that was asked, and we don't know the detail of the advice that was given. That's the challenge. So my understanding from the CEO and the GM is that they've also had careful advice and clarification about what is considered. So now we have two different sources of advice.
Point of order.
The dilemma.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The point of order is that we also have not been provided written advice from the general manager and the CEO about this. You're asking me to table written advice, but you're not asking them to table their written advice on this particular issue.
Thank you, Councillor. All I was asking is, you're the one who has referred to having the advice. I was just wondering if it was available in writing, because you make reference to these advices, but we've never received them.
And I provided clarification to you to say, no, it was verbal.
Thank you, and I've noted that. Councillors, we will take a 5-minute adjournment to gain some further clarification, because there is a significant difference of understanding that we need to try to resolve, and we will then return and potentially then move into close. But it will be a 5-minute adjournment to allow for the taking of that additional advice. Thank you. So
Mr. Mayor, this is a procedural motion and hasn't been voted on yet.
So I'm asking, Councillor, that we leave it on the table so that we can seek additional. I'm trying to seek additional information to inform councillors on considering your procedural motion. Is that?
But my motion is to do exactly that.
So I'm just seeing if in 5 minutes we can get clarification. If we can't, then it will rest on the table. I'm trying to allow us to move forward with the business of council.
Well,
I don't think that's...
You're seeking clarification to confirm Councillor Swanborough's procedural motion or amendment.
So I'm
we
saying...
can just vote on this and then we can just move into the 5 minutes.
So I'm saying, Councillor, this may well preempt the conversation if we're able to get the advice. I understand your point. This leaves it sit on the table till the next meeting.
No, it doesn't, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't. If you read the standing orders, the standing order says when it lies on the table, it's because it's going to be addressed in the current meeting, not at a future meeting. And that's what I'm asking. And what you're proposing to do...
Thank you, Councillor. Then we'll put the motion, the procedural motion. It's not an amendment, it's a procedural motion, but that's okay. You can come back and correct that. Those in favour? I'm happy. Right, that's carried unanimously. Now we'll adjourn for 5 minutes to see if we can resolve any information so that we can then understand how we proceed with the original motion. GM charge. Councillors, be back in 5, and gallery, we'll endeavour to be back in 5. Thank you. Welcome back, councillors, executive, and welcome back, gallery. Conversation progresses with relevant experts. However, in the interest of moving forward because of time sensitivities, I will ask that Councillor Enright consider amending an amendment to his original motion to deal with item 11.1. As it does, it relates to the local government's budget, which is all of the wording that is referred, I believe, in the legislation. And if we get the clarification on item 11.2, we will be back into open to close out item 11.1 and deal with that there. Otherwise, we may consider withdrawing it for future meeting whilst we get our legal clarification. I do agree with Councillor Swanborough on one thing. We believe we're acting in good faith, but would have been nice to have, I just remind all councillors, the reason we get the agenda out early is to allow for any additional questions to come forward to allow preparation. That helps our meetings run smoothly, encourage us to really use that intervening time properly for that purpose. So, Councillor Enright, are you comfortable to continue to move forward with your motion, noting that it now will deal with only item 11.1?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity. Yes, certainly happy that we continue with 11.1 and happy for that motion to be amended as necessary.
Thank you. Councillor McGuinness, as the seconder, you're comfortable with that? Thank you. He's nodding his head to the microphone.
Yeah, agreed, Mayor.
Therefore, we put the motion to move into close to deal with item 11.1 at this time. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Gallery, we will be, I would estimate, 10 to 15 minutes. So be on standby from 10 minutes for the discussion of this item. Thank you. Back into open. Thank you, Gallery. We have a recommendation to introduce, please. GM Asset Environment Sustainability.
Thank you, Mayor. For item 11.1, 2021-2024 South East Queensland Community Stimulus Program funding. The recommendation is that 1, Council retrospectively endorse the application under the 2021-2024 South East Queensland Community Stimulus Program for the following projects: community and council facilities upgrades, waste facilities upgrade, air conditioning upgrade / replacements at Boona Cultural Centre and Vonda Youngman Community Centre, car park upgrades at Selwyn Park, Bow Desert and Coronation Park, Boona, and Enterprise Drive pavement works. And 2, the council retrospectively endorse the application under the 2021-2024 South East Queensland Community Stimulus Program under the contestable portion of the program for the following projects: Rymore Circuit to Tambourine Village footpath, Duck Creek Road reconstruction, e-charging stations at Bow Desert, Boona, Canungra and Tambourine Mountain, and 4thly, Main Western Road footpath, Hartley Road to hang gliders launch area. And 3, council allocate applicable contributions as part of the 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023, 2023-2024 operational and capital budgets, if successful and required. And 4, in accordance with clause 22.6.3 of the Scenic Rim Regional Council Standing Orders Procedure CM 03.01 PR.01, Council maintain confidentiality over the content of the report until such time as formal notification of approval is obtained from the Queensland Government.
Thank you. Councillors, we have a recommendation. I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Any additional questions noting a number of confidential natures about this matter? Not. I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Wishing to speak further, Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, certainly happy to move this recommendation to a motion. I think it shows the opportunities that we have explored in the past 12 months and further using additional funding from outside that of our council base. I certainly think this is a great opportunity for a series of projects to be delivered or assets improved throughout our entire community, and are very grateful for the funding that has been offered through application from the Queensland Government to assist us in the community stimulus program funding.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking to speak additionally? We put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now, GM, Council Sustainability, do we have some legal clarification?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did reach out, took liberty to reach out and seek clarification around the query. The query focused on the definition of budget and whether that pertained to only future budgets or current budget at hand. The legal opinion who provide legal advice and commentary around the legislation, it was thought that there's certainly no indication that it relates only to the future budgets. However, that's not to discredit or the interpretation of what members of at the department may have as their opinion or interpretation. But from memory, Mr. Mayor, any time that we seek clarity from the department, they provide an interpretive service and not a legal service, and they do stress that council should seek their own legal opinion. They're not there to provide a legal service. So we've reached out to legal advisors, and there's certainly no indicative or nothing that restricts or defines budget as only being future budgets.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Swanborough.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think the procedural motion was pretty clear, and that procedural motion was to get advice from the Department of Local Government. It wasn't to go off and get legal advice from council solicitors whom we pay very big amounts of money every year to. We needed to get an independent view, and that's why my procedural motion hasn't been adhered to. And I object to the fact that you didn't reach out to the Department of Local Government, because that's what the meeting decided we would do.
Mr. Mayor, I thought I'd add clarity to that, in that if we do reach out in terms of a legal interpretation of the Act, the department does not provide legal advice and ask council seek independent legal advice. And I took the query as being trying to clarify what it meant around defining budget.
So, councillors, we are not going to continue to debate this today. There is, I understand from an indication from the GM, this matter can lay on the table whilst we get formal. I do note the clarity, and I agree from prior conversations, the department are very good at giving an interpretation, but they very rarely will commit it to a legal outcome, which is why they do refer us back. I've had a number of those occasions. We will go through a proper process to ensure. I do not want us wandering. I'm very comfortable that we could proceed based on the prior advice that we've had. However, given there is no urgency on this matter, I propose that we extend the original motion to actually ask the GM.
And sorry, Mr. Mayor, just to provide clarity, I did reach out to the department, but they've yet to respond. So I did. So we're not able to satisfy that requirement today, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Department of Local Government are the ones who draft the legislation. Their Parliament is the ones, when you read the bill, when it's put before Parliament, it gives explanatory notes as to what the meaning of various bills put to Parliament are. And I think it was totally appropriate to reach out to the Department of Local Government senior policy people to advise us what the intent of the legislation was about. And that's why it was important to get advice from that particular department. They might get Crown Law advice on this themselves, which might be contrary to the legal advice that council gets from its own paid legal advisors. So I think it's unfair to suggest that because we've got legal advice from one company that we hire, that that's superior to the advice from the Department of Local Government.
Councillor, I will let that lie. That was clearly the indication was the matter can rest until a subsequent meeting. So I've been told, CEO, because there is a lack of clarity. No one wants to do the wrong thing. and I think we all understand how the legislation is formed and how it is developed and interpreted or rolled out. I am noted we have a motion that left it, it's unrealistic to think that in the timing available to us today that we can satisfy your expectation, Councillor. It was clear that we reached out to the department and not surprisingly, they're not available on a moment's notice, just like happens to us sometimes. So on that basis, that we need to consider either before we move forward, whether you're prepared to withdraw it before we reconsider it and present it at a future date, GM?
Yes, I'm prepared to withdraw it and present at a future date.
With those additional clarifications?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That being said, we will, that brings us to the close of today's meeting. Thank you to the gallery for your patience, and thank you, councillors, and thank you indeed to executive. And again, councillors, in closing, I would just issue another reminder. We receive our agendas well in advance of meetings. We shifted our meeting from Monday because new councillors asked for the Monday to put forward matters so that they could get responses available ahead of the meeting. So we've tried to create plenty of time for consideration of reports and raising of issues so that we can allow the facilitation of good decision making. I encourage you to make use of that time effectively to support good process. Thank you and good day.